All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Torah Studies. So this is our kickoff session of our brand new third season, 5785. And as we've been doing since the beginning of our year of Torah study, the focus is on Rashi. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not studying Parsha. Of course we are. But what we're doing is we're exploring the Parsha in the light or through the lens of Rashi, through the lens of the Rebbe's interpretation of Rashi. We got a few lenses going on over here, but the final result is brilliant. And so today we're going to focus on the main theme of this week's Parsha, which is a double Parsha, double portion. So buy one, get one, a little BOGO Parsha action. The Torah portions this week, Tazria-Metzora. Some years we read them separately as two separate parshiot. This year, we read it together, just due to the nature of the calendar. We are combining these Torah portions. Tazria-Metzora both speak about, at the core, the affliction known as Tzaraat. Not Tsaras, that's something else. That's a general word for negative stuff that happens, but Tzaraat. Now, Tzaraat is typically translated as, who knows the typical translation? Leprosy. Leprosy. However, and we do this straight off the bat for the clarification. However, in Judaism, in Jewish tradition, and as the commentaries point out, we understand that this skin ailment was not, just Tzaraat. Sorry, it was not just leprosy. It was not leprosy of a physical sort. It was a spiritual malady that manifested in a physical form. And one of the ways that we know this is because the very same Torah portions, let me clarify, Torah portion Tazria talks about human Tzaraat, but in the Torah portion of Metzora, which is the second of our two for this week, it talks about Tzaraat that might afflict clothing or homes. Leprosy doesn't work like that. It doesn't afflict clothing and it doesn't afflict homes. So clearly this was a spiritual malady that also, at its core, that also had a physical manifestation, but it wasn't simply, get some, I don't really know what the medical treatment is for leprosy, but it's certainly not a grab some Neutrogena, Tzaraat Strength Edition cream, rub it in, and you should be good to go. That is not what's going on. You got to address the core issue. What was the core issue? Gossip. The Talmud. The Talmud discusses seven different sins that could lead to Tzaraat. However, the most famous is gossip. By the way, on the lines of gossip, did you hear what happened to what's his name? I'm kidding. That would be gossip. So gossip is considered to be the number one cause for Tzaraat. The number one doctor recommended cause for Tzaraat is gossip, and thus the prescription for Tzaraat is, at least for human Tzaraat, is isolation. If you look, and we're not gonna focus on human Tzaraat today. Today we're gonna focus on the home Tzaraat home edition, the one that afflicts the home, the actual bricks of the house. But human Tzaraat, part of the healing process or part of the cure is quarantine, is by being secluded or sequestered outside the camp. And as the commentaries point out, it's not a punishment, but it's actually part of the cure. It's part of the solution. What's the problem? The problem is too much gossiping. The solution is can't gossip if there's no one around. This is before the smartphone. Now we would have a problem. You isolate someone, oh baby, the gossip will just begin. Because now we're on social media and now we're on, now we're texting the gossip. But back in the day, certainly if you're isolated, there's no gossip. So that's when it comes to human gossip. When it comes to, human Tzaraat, when it comes to clothing Tzaraat, there's another formula for what to do with the clothing and how to ascertain that it's Tzaraat. Today, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we're going to look at the Tzaraat that afflicts the home. And we're going to look at a few things. Number one, what does it look like? Number one, what does it look like? Number two, what's the process of ascertaining it and healing from it? Number three, what are the results of Tzaraat in the home, and number 4, what are the lessons that we can take away? And of course, we're going to do this all through the lens of the Rashi's commentary in the verse as elucidated and expounded upon by the Rebbe. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin with text number 1. I'm going to read this. Text number 1 is very long. I'm going to put this up on the screen. Don't worry. I'm going to put this up on the screen so you can see it as well. It contains about 11 or 12 verses that speak about the protocol for dealing with Tzaraat in the home. In short, I'm going to summarize kind of before we get started. If a person notices some discoloration on the home, so what you do is you call a pressure washer. Kidding. What you back in the day, if they would see this discoloration that would be certain colors, they would call him the Kohen. Kohen, you had to have a Kohen. All things related to Tzaraat. They would call him the Kohen. The Kohen would look and see if it looked like it might be Tzaraat. Then everyone and everything had to clear out of the house. I think, back in the day, I don't know how many possessions people had. Nowadays, it's like you can call like a moving company to like empty a home, like 2 men in a truck. This is not sponsored by 2 Men in a Truck. That's just the first company I thought of. Whatever. But like you have to and the reason is because the moment, if it were to be designated or concluded that this home is afflicted with Tzaraat, every item inside the home would become impure, and a lot of the things would have to be essentially destroyed forever. So if you don't want that, you got to take it out before it is pronounced as Tzaraat. So you clear out the home. It's quarantined. Basically, no one's inside of it for 7 days. If after 7 days it's receded or it's faded, then you get the all clear and it's all good. If it stays the same or gets worse, well, then that's a bad sign. And ultimately, it could lead to removal of some of the stones, some of the bricks that are afflicted with Tzaraat. If it still gets worse, then the whole house is to be taken down. And that is that. Let's read this inside. Text 1a. You guys have it in the printouts in front of you. It's a long text, so I feel like I should just read it and take one for the team. So give me 1 second. Let me get it ready for our online crew. One sec. Stay here with me. Okay. Ready to roll. Okay, verse 34. This is from chapter 14 of Leviticus, the third book of the Torah, and it says as follows. When you come to the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as a possession, this is, of course, in the voice of God, I will place a legion of Tzaraat on the house in the land of your possession. So what to do? 35. The owner of the house should come and tell the priest, the Kohen, something that looks like a legion, Tzaraat, appeared to me in the house. The priest will order that they clear the house before he comes to look at the legion. This way, everything in the home will not become unclean. Then the priest will come to examine the house. So if you put the phone call or whatever, you send the message to the Kohen, the first thing the Kohen will say is, if you even suspect this, get everything out of the house. Because the moment it might be pronounced as Tzaraat, as I mentioned a few moments ago, it's going to be too late for some of the things. It doesn't work retroactively. So as long as it's out before the Kohen shows up, you're good to go. All right, verse 37. He will look at the legion. Now, if the legion in the walls of the house consists of dark green or dark red sunken-looking stains, appearing as if they are deeper than the wall, then the priest will leave the house through the entrance and quarantine the house for 7 days. The priest will return on the 7th day and look at the house. If the legion has spread in the walls of the house, the priest will order that they remove the stones upon which the legion is found. And they will discard them in an unclean place outside the city. So again, this is after 7 days. If it's still there or if it's spread, then you got to remove those specific stones. Maybe it's isolated to those stones, so you take them out and you discard them outside the city. 41, he will scrape out the house from the inside and all around, and the mortar dust from his scrapings will be discarded in an unclean place outside the city. 42, and they will take other stones and bring them as replacements for those stones, and the priest will take other mortar dust and plaster the house. If the legion returns and erupts in the house after he removed the stones and after the house was scraped all around and plastered, the priest, 44, the priest will come and look at it. Now, if the legion in the house is spread, the legion in the home is a malignant Tzaraat, the house is unclean. The priest should demolish the house, its stones, its wood, and all the mortar dust of the house, and take them to an unclean place outside the city. And thus, in that final possibility, in the final theoretical, the entire house is demolished and a new home has to be rebuilt in that place. And so that would lead to a scenario where where it would make sense to have and carry some Tzaraat insurance, under your homeowner's policy, just in case it's going to cover the rebuild of that place. Of course, that is tongue in cheek, but the point is, back in the day, that was the protocol. The Kohen initially, before he even shows up, he says, get everything out of the house. Shows up. There's two options. It's like a tree, right? You have like this little possibility tree. One option is it's totally different colors. The Kohen would say, don't worry about it. You're good. All is good. Bring everything back in. If it's the bad colors, right, meaning the possible Tzaraat colors, then he says, all right, quarantine for 7 days. If after 7 days it's receded or faded or gone, once again, it's all good. Go back into the home. If it's spread or it's still there, whatever it is, then you take out those specific stones or bricks that are affected. You replace them with new ones. If after that it stops or recedes, again, good to go. If not, and spreads, then the whole home has to be demolished and ultimately rebuilt. All right, that's the story. So what we're going to do now that we have an overview, any questions on the law? It makes sense? I mean, as much as this can make sense. Any questions, comments?
What other lesions would they be getting on their walls?
You're saying what other lesions?
Yeah.
You're saying if it wasn't Tzaraat?
Yeah.
Mold? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. What else could it be? Who knows?
Yeah.
Could be anything. Rust, mold, pollen. If it's likely.
I don't know. It feels like cheating that they're allowed to empty the house before it gets declared.
Okay, you're asking a good question.
If it's Tzaraat,
it would go back retroactively. Good. So here we encounter. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question. We were asking. It seems like a bit of a cheat to say that take everything out before I show up, because if I show up and pronounce it and it becomes unclean, then everything's going to be unclean. But if you take it out before, then you get to escape. Kind of like get out of jail free. How does that work? So I don't know that I have a good answer, but I'm going to give you parallel examples, which may enhance the question, but maybe it'll kind of give a parallel. There are very often in halacha we find this, and there's something called chazaka. Chazaka means a presumption or a presumptive state of being. So, like for example, I don't know, a mezuzah on your door has a cheskat kashrut, has a chazaka that it's kosher. Why does it have a presumption of being kosher? Because when you bought it and you had it checked out, it was kosher. So the presumption is that, if it's kosher when you put it up, it's still kosher. However, we're told that we should, have it taken down and checked, once or twice every 7 years. So what happens if you take it down and you look at it and, oh my gosh, it's the outside, it's the front door mezuzah, and I guess it's been weathered. It's maybe it wasn't a weather tight case, and now turns out some water, moisture, humidity has gotten in, blurred the letters, and it's no longer kosher. Here's the question. When was the last time you had a kosher mezuzah? You know what the answer is? That day. We assume the chazaka works until you know that it's not kosher. Meaning kosher, 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 marsha, until you take down the mezuzah and it's not kosher, and then at that point we say, now it's not kosher. But hold on. But what about yesterday? You think it just happened? We don't know. Because we don't know, you go by chazaka. Until you know that it's not good, you don't go retroactively. First of all, where would you draw that line? Where would you say that it's no good? But in general, things have a presumption until they don't. And the moment they don't, that's when you start. So the homeowner notices something looks a little strange. Something strange in the neighborhood. So who are you going to call? The Kohen. You call the Kohen, and he says, look, you have a chazaka of a non-Tzaraat home, because no Kohen has looked at it, and only a Kohen can pronounce it Tzaraat. Great. Get everything out of the house. If it comes to the point where I declare it Tzaraat, great, there's nothing in the home. You're going to tell me, but it was there a minute ago? Yeah, but it had a presumption of kosher until it didn't. By the way, the same thing is true with the mikvah. What happens if you inspect the mikvah and it turns out that your bar, which means the bar is literally literally translated as a pit, but the well, like the reservoir that has the rainwater. What if it's below the minimum line? Oh my gosh, you need an X amount of water, of kosher water, and you didn't have it. Somebody comes and inspects it. You inspect it every so often, and it doesn't have the requisite amount. What about the people that went to the mikveh? What do you say? Somebody went to mikveh the day before, the night before. What happens? The answer is it's kosher until you know that it's not. So at this point, now that you know it's not kosher, and no one can use it in a kosher fashion. But even a day before, you can't presume that it's not kosher until you know that it's not kosher. That's how strong chazaka is in Jewish law. Chazaka, again, presumption. Make sense?
How long from when they call the Kohen to when the Kohen comes back is the time period? How long do they have?
The Kohen just won't show up until you take everything out of the house.
Really?
That's how it'll work. Yeah.
Wow.
The Kohen will say, let me know when everything's out of the house and I'll show up. It doesn't mean you drag your feet. And maybe halacha codifies this and says, I've never seen a time period put on it. But look, they were living in the time. I mean, I'm going to say it's a luxury, even though it's the opposite. They were living in times of austerity, if that's the right word, of minimalism. Most people were living fairly minimalistic, so as to remove the contents of the home probably didn't take, you get the family members together, probably within a few hours it was done. Nowadays, oh my gosh, I got all my tchotchkes over there, I got my files over there, I got my, now what are we going to do? All right, now it would be a little bit more complicated. There's a solution. Don't gossip. I mean, that's the number one solution to all this. All right, so that's the story. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi comments on the very opening verse of text 1 that we read. Rashi makes what I would call a fairly astonishing statement. Remind me your name. Is it
Scott?
Scott. Okay, Scott. If you don't mind, please read text 2a, which is Rashi's comment on that opening verse.
And I will place a legion of Tzaraat. The notification that they will be struck by legions is a happy tiding. This is because the Amorites concealed treasures of gold in the walls of their homes for the 40 years the Jews were in the desert. When homeowners demolished their homes due to legions, they found the treasure. Thank you.
Comes along Rashi, and he almost out of left field. Rashi comes along and says, oh, FYI, the home Tzaraat was actually a positive, not a negative. First of all, what is actually happening? He comes along and says, you should know, here's what happened historically. The Amorites were one of the peoples that lived in the land of Israel before the Jewish people arrived after the Exodus. So the Amorites were hiding gold, treasure in the walls of their homes. First of all, you're probably thinking, who does that? Who's hiding treasure in the walls of their homes? Well, the answer is the Amorites. This is before, I don't know, think of it as like under your mattress, right? But if you didn't really have a mattress, then you put in the wall somehow. You kind of, I guess, you dug a little hole, made a little container compartment, put the coins in a little bag, boom, and now it's there. And the Amorites were hiding gold. So it turns out that through this whole Tzaraat on the home situation, when they removed the stones or the bricks or demolished a home, what did they find? They found treasure and gold. And now you're thinking, yeah, but was it impure? I don't know. They figured out a way how to deal with that piece of it. Certainly they figured out how to deal with the hidden gold. But that's what Rashi comes along and says. Why does it say, Ki savoy eretz Canaan v'nasati neged Tzaraat b'veis eretz? And it's almost like God doesn't say it tentatively. If you look back at text 1, it's not like God says, if something goes wrong and something and you get Tzaraat, then this. No, God says, when you come to the land, I will give you Tzaraat in the homes. That's it. You're just going to get what? That sounds like a bad thing. Rashi says, no, it's a good thing. Why is it a good thing? Let's say get the treasure. How do you get the treasure? Through demolishing the house. Okay, that's Rashi. Honestly, it's a bit of as I said before, I don't think anybody would have expected that comment of Rashi on this series of verses. It didn't say the same thing about Tzaraat on the skin. It doesn't say that, oh, when you're looking at the skin, you'll discover, I don't know what the other thing would be. Or when it's on the clothing, it's actually, there's an upside to that. It doesn't say that because you get to get a new outfit, new wardrobe. It doesn't say any of that. When it comes to the home tzaraat, suddenly it's like, oh, there's a positive. There's a secret positive with the demolishing of the home. So it seems a little strange, but here we are. Now, where does Rashi get this idea from? Obviously, Rashi's not making up backstories. Rashi gets it typically from Midrash and Talmud. So indeed, there's a Midrash that essentially says the same thing. Okay, so right now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Midrash, and this is going to help us understand the source of Rashi. But as you know by now, because we've been doing Rashi, we've been analyzing Rashi now for about 6 months, what we're going to pay attention to is not just where Rashi got it from, but the differences, the distinctions between the Midrash source and Rashi's comments. So, Dasi, if you don't mind, please read text 2b from the Midrash.
The passage states, and I will place a lesion of Tzaraat. Rabbi Chia asked, is being struck by lesions a good tiding? Rabbi Shimon, son of Yochai, explained, when the Canaanites heard that the Jews were coming to Israel, they hid their money in the houses and the fields. God said, I promised their ancestors that I would bring their descendants into a land filled with good, as it is written, and houses filled with all goodness. What did God do? He afflicted the house with lesions, and when the owner demolished the house, he found a treasure. But who told the Canaanites that the Jews were about to enter the land?
I have a different question.
Wait, hold on. Wait,
Okay.
turn the page. Rabbi
sorry.
Shmuel.
Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Nachman, answered, Joshua sent 3 letters of warning. A, if you want to vacate the land, vacate. B, if you want to make peace with us, sue for peace. C, if you want to make war, come make war.
So there's a lot. So thank you for reading that. I need to. There's a lot of things I need to explain. Just the literal meaning of the words, and then we're going to ask some questions. Okay. So first of all, I alluded to this before. God says in the Torah, when you come into the land, I will place a legion of Tzaraat. And Rabbi Chia is saying, like, God's almost like taking pride in, like, I'm going to give you Tzaraat. Like, what? That's a weird thing to say. So the answer is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi, the great Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, no, there's a whole backstory, and it's similar to Rashi's backstory, that basically gold was hidden, and that is the way that they got the treasure. I just want to clarify a few things. One of the questions that the Talmud, the Midrash asks is, who told the Canaanites that the Jews were about to enter the land? Notice, why did they hide the treasure before the advancing Jewish people? How did they know that they were about to enter? And so the answer is because Joshua sent 3 letters of warning. He sent all the people that lived in Israel up until that point. He sent them a letter, 3 options. Number 1, if you want to leave, leave. Number 2, if you want peace, we can negotiate. Sue for peace. I don't know what the meaning of sue for peace.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, it's a very weird language because in the Hebrew, it's lahashlim yashlim. If you want to, lahashlim means to pay, but meaning not sue. Sue is weird. It's not like a lawsuit. We want to negotiate for peace. Let's make a deal. If you want to make a deal, let's make a deal. So A, if you want to leave, leave. If you want to make a deal. That's B. And number C is, if you want to fight, we'll fight. We're prepared for all 3 possibilities. Okay, so that's it. So what are the things that you know? I'm going to keep this up here on the screen. What are the nuances, the distinctions that you notice between the Midrash and Rashi? Go.
Rashi is the Amorites, the Midrash is the Canaanites.
Good. Right, let me say that. Let me repeat that. Number 1, Rashi, if you recall, Rashi said that who is the one that hid the gold? The Amorites, the Amori. And the Midrash, which is the source of Rashi, says Canaanites, the Canaanim. Well, which one is it? Canaanites or Amorites? Okay, that's one difference. What's the other difference? There's more.
Rashi is the home, the Midrash has houses and fields.
Rashi says that where did they hide the gold? In the walls of their homes. And the Midrash says they hid it in the houses and the fields. Adds the fields. Good. What else? I'm going to add something.
Time.
Well, Rashi says gold, and the Midrash says money. Now you might say, well, that's the same thing, but it's not exactly the same thing. Gold is gold, money is money. Okay, what else? Dasi, what did you just say?
Rashi said that it was during the 40 years the Jews were in the desert, but the Midrash is saying they did it like right before the Jews
Ooh,
came.
oh, that's a killer question right there. Fantastic. Rashi says, what was the timeline when the Amorites concealed the treasures of gold? For the 40 years the Jews were in the desert. That means throughout the 40 years, they kept on hiding their treasure, their gold in the walls. Whereas according to the Midrash, when it says, how did they know that the Jews were about to enter the land? Well, Joshua sent the message. When did Joshua send those letters? At the end of the 40 years. So they would not have hid them all 40 years. They'd have only hid it when they knew the Jews were advancing at the end of the 40 years. So if I were to recap the questions, what I would actually say, I'm going to be a little bit slanted here for a second. What I would actually say is that the Midrash makes a lot of sense. Rashi is a little bit puzzling. The Midrash says, let's start from the beginning. The Midrash says that who were the ones that hid the treasure? The Canaanim, the Canaanites. The Canaanites is a general term that refers to, because the land was Canaan, right? Canaanites refer to all the 7 indigenous peoples. The Amorites is one of the 7. So the Midrash is more inclusive. Rashi is more exclusive. That begs the question, why does Rashi minimize it to the Amorites? That's question number 1 on Rashi. Number 2, the Midrash makes more sense. Makes a lot more sense because it says that they hid the treasure when they were notified that the Jews were about to enter. They said, oh, we don't want the Jews taking our gold, plundering our gold. We're going to hide the gold or hide the treasure, hide the money. And that's it. Keep it tucked away. The Midrash makes sense. Rashi says the Amorites hid it for 40 years. Why were they hiding the gold for 40 years? The Midrash makes sense. The Midrash explains how the peoples of Canaan knew that the Jews were advancing because Joshua sent letters, apparently. Whereas according to Rashi, how did the Amorites know that the Jews were advancing? Why were they hiding the gold in the first place? My friends, the Midrash, which is the source of the commentary, makes a lot of sense the way it's written. It's Canaanites. It's only at the end of the 40 years after Joshua sends letters. That makes sense. Comes along Rashi, and Rashi, inspired by the Midrash, he tweaks it. And he tweaks it in a way that begs the question, why Amorites, not Canaanites? Why all 40 years? And who told them that the Jews were coming? These are the questions that we might ask on Rashi. The one thing we know is that Rashi didn't make a mistake. It's not like Rashi learned the Midrash and said, I'm just going to mix it up a little bit. Rashi certainly, it goes without saying, was extremely deliberate and intentional about his commentary, certainly about modifying. If he deviates from a Midrash, certainly it is for an intentional purpose. And thus, the question is, what is Rashi getting at? What is spurring Rashi on to make these changes? Okay.
Can I ask something
Yes.
that goes
Sure.
before that?
Yeah.
God said, when you come to the land which I am giving you, I will place a legion of Tzaraat on the house in the land of your possession. But Tzaraat was a punishment.
Correct.
So he's giving them,
Unilateral.
he's giving them not a punishment, but
Good.
a reward.
Good. Toba's asking a very good question.
I don't
We
get
always
it.
thought, and the way I presented at the beginning of the class, is Tzaraat is a punishment for too much gossip.
Right.
It's a
so then
negative,
he's giving them a reward.
And now it's
for
saying that
having
God is
Tzaraat.
rewarding us.
Yeah.
You know what? That's going to be our 4th question.
Oh,
That's going to be no, I love it. I love it so much. We're making it our 4th question.
okay, that was my first question.
No. Well, he asked 3
Okay.
questions on Rashi.
Okay.
Why Amorites? Why all 40 years? And how did they know that the Jews were coming? But now the 4th question is, what's this business? Whether the Midrash, or it's not a question only on Rashi, the Midrash and Rashi, what's this business of reframing house Tzaraat to be a good thing as opposed to a bad thing?
Right.
It's a punishment. Now you're telling me it's a good thing? You're telling me God is gifting the Jewish people money and gold by giving them Tzaraat? What's going on here? Since when is this it's supposed to be a reward? It's supposed to be a punishment.
Right.
What's going on? Okay, good. Hold that question. Hold all the questions. Let's go through this one thing at a time. So number one, to address the question, which I think was the 3rd question we asked, how would the Amorites know? How did the people know that the Jews were coming? Well, that's an easy answer. That's a very easy answer. Who just read? Mira, did you just read? No.
Yeah.
Dasi. You just read. Meira, we're up to you? Okay. Meira, please read. Give me 1 second. Please read text 3a. Now, hold on before you read. Let me explain. Text 3a is from the Song at the Sea. This is from Shirat Hayam, the song that the Jewish people sang while crossing the Red Sea. And take it away, 3a, please.
Then the chieftains of Edom were startled, and trembling seized the powerful men of Moab, and all the inhabitants of Canaan melted.
So what we find here, thank you for reading that, what we find here is that at the time of the Exodus, or more specifically, the splitting of the sea, the people living in other nations, the people of the region, they knew about it, they heard about it. So to our question, well, how did the Amorites know, according to Rashi, without letters from Joshua, because he doesn't mention any letters from Joshua, how did the Amorites know for all 40 years, meaning from the Exodus, that the Jews were coming? It says clearly here, the chieftains of Edom were startled, the trembling seized the powerful men of Moab, the Canaanites melted. That means is they were afraid for their own lives. Why? Because they knew the Jews were making their way ultimately to the land of Israel, the promised land. They knew God's promise to the Jewish people, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They knew that there was this tradition, etc. Look at Rashi and text. Do one more, please. Meira, text 3b. Rashi says,
They said, the Jews are coming upon us to annihilate us and take possession of our land.
That's Rashi. And again, we're trying to understand this according to Rashi. So Rashi, in his comment on Exodus 15:15, which is text 3a, Rashi himself says, what was all the trembling? What was all the fear? What was all the startling? What was all the melting about? They said the Jews are coming to annihilate us and take possession of our land, which means that from the moment of the Exodus, from the beginning of the 40 years, they knew that the Jewish people were coming. And thus it makes sense that if they really felt that the Jewish people were coming, they would have done what with their possessions? They would have hid their possessions. They would have put it away, tucked it away, because if the enemy is coming, you don't want to leave your cash out on the table, on the kitchen table. You don't want to leave it out that somebody can plunder it. You want to hide it. You want to save it. Maybe we'll win. We're able to come back and grab all the stuff. Yes?
I was going to say, if they know that they're coming, why don't they take the stuff and flee? But I guess if they think they can win,
they might think they're going to win. Right? They might think they're going to, or they might think that the Jews will eventually be kicked out and then they'll come back. And you're asking a very good question. The commentators address it. The question, let me repeat the question because some others may have it. Question is, well, if they really thought that the Jews were coming, they were really afraid, then why not take their possessions and leave the land entirely? Well, that could be asked, forget about the money. In general, why don't they just leave right after the Exodus? And the answer is either they thought they had a chance to win in a war against the Jewish people, or they thought that eventually the Jews would be moved out and they would come back to their houses and they would know where the secret location of their gelt was. Okay, either way. But this begs a question. If all of the nations, if all the Canaanite nations, if all the nations that live in the land of Canaan knew about the Jewish advance, or, at some point the Jewish advance, and they were all afraid and they all thought, so then why does Rashi only mention the Amorites? And so for this, we have another very interesting twist, again, based on previous information that the student that's been paying attention to Torah study would have remembered from previous parshiot. What is it? What am I referring to? You know what? Hold on. Before we get there. Hold on. Before we get there, let's read text 4. No. Sorry. Not read text 4 yet. Hold on. Don't read it yet. Okay. So that begs the question. So if all of the nations knew that the Jews were going to advance and they were all hiding their gold and their valuables away, then why does Rashi only mention the Amorites? And the answer is because here's what happened. All of the nations, let's say shortly after the Exodus, they were afraid, and so they hid all their treasures and all their gold, all their possessions. But what happens when a month passes? Where are the Jews? 2 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years. I don't know about you, but at some point, they might be like, I could use the gold. Let me pull it back out. If I need to, I'll hide it again. Here's what happened. And this is again understanding the narrative according to Rashi. All of the Canaanite nations hid it initially. but eventually pulled it back out because we're the Jewish people. It took 40 years for the Jews to enter. But now the question is, well, why not the Amorites also? Why does Rashi, the Amorites kept it hidden all 40 years? There's a very simple answer. I'm going to share this outside, then we'll do the text inside. Very simple answer. There was a tradition that was a long-standing tradition. God had told Abraham about this, that the first nation to fall amongst the 7 nations of the land of Canaan, the first nation that the Jews would take would be the Amorites. They were the canary in the coal mine, as it were. They were going to be the first one. Therefore, they didn't have the luxury to wait and see, are the Jews coming? All of the other nations could say, well, when the Jews get the Amorites, I guess we'll rehide our stuff. But the Amorites, they were going to be the first. They never knew when that surprise attack was going to come. Are you with me on this?
What was the source for that?
We're going to read the source inside. I'm just telling you outside that I'm going to substantiate my theory. It's not a theory. I'll substantiate it. We'll do the text inside. But understand the theory, the logic. From the moment of the Exodus, all of the nations were afraid. The Jews are coming. So they all would have immediately hidden all their valuables. But upon there being a delay, all of the other nations would have taken out their valuables, except for one of the nations, the Amorites, because they were the first in line. They were the border nation, and there was a tradition that they were the ones to fall. They would be the ones to fall first. And therefore, they kept it hidden because at any moment, they might be the first ones to be attacked. That's why Rashi says that which gold were they going to find inside the walls? The Amorites. The Amorite gold, the ones that they had hidden all 40 years, those are the only ones that hid it for all 40 years. Rashi's interpretation is beautiful. Now all we have to do is support our assertion. This is a bit of a bold take. And so, Toba, we're up to you. Please read text number 4, and we're going to develop this slowly. All right, here we go. Not that slowly. Text number 4, take it away. Here's in the Rebbe's words.
Once they saw that the Jews were delayed for a protracted period in the desert, they had no reason to keep their money hidden. They would not worry about it until it became clear that the Jews were about to enter the land.
Thank you. And how would it become clear that the Jews were about to enter the land? Well, if they would advance. But who were they going to advance against first? The Amorites. How do we know that? Text 5a. Text 5a is all the way back in Genesis 15. Who remembers Genesis 15? Well, Rashi expects us to. Rashi expects us to. If we read it, we should retain it. Here's what it says. God tells Abraham by the covenant of the parts, V'dar revi yashuvu hena. The 4th generation, God tells Abraham, your 4th generation will return here. For the iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete until then. In other words, it'll take 4 generations for me, God says, to be very upset at the Amorites, and then I'm going to kick them out, and then you'll take over. Who does God specify of all the nations, of all the Canaanite nations? Who does God specify to Abraham? The Amorites. Why? They were going to be the first. They were going to be the first to fall. In Genesis 15, 2 books ago, we've already learned that the Amorites were the first would be the first to fall. The Amorites also knew that. What, you didn't think they didn't study the Bible? You didn't think they didn't know Torah? I'm kidding. It wasn't yet print. Right. But they also knew the tradition that they were the first to fall. Therefore, they didn't have the luxury to not keep their gold hidden because they could be caught in a surprise attack. All the other nations would say, oh my gosh, the Jews are advancing. Look, they conquered the Amorites. Let's put our gold back. The Amorites there was no one before the Amorites. Therefore, they kept their gold hidden all 40 years. Look at what Rashi says, text 5b. The next page. For the iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete. They would not deserve to be sent out of their land until the 4th generation. This is because God does not punish a nation until its measure is full. In this case, its measure of iniquity, of negativity is full. Once it is, complete evil or complete negativity, then God takes out that nation.
Could they have just decided to repent?
Yeah, theoretically. But there was a prophecy that they wouldn't, or that they would fall. Text 6, we're going to skip. Fine, good. Folks, we have another section to this class. But before we do the final section is going to answer your question, Toba, about punishment turning into a reward. But right as of right now, we have the most incredible and elegant explanation of Rashi. When you read Rashi's commentary, it may seem a little strange, again, for the reward versus punishment conundrum. That's one question. But, when you read Rashi, straightforward. You're going to break down your homes, break down the walls, you'll find treasure because the Amorites put it there. But when you trace Rashi's source back to the Midrash, you're left with a bunch of questions. Canaanites versus Amorites, 40 years versus final approach. What's Rashi saying? Why is Rashi deviating? And the answer, my friends, is clear. Rashi is pshat. Rashi is the simple explanation. The Torah doesn't tell us about any letters that Joshua sends to the nations. We don't know that in pshat. There's a medrash, not challenging the medrash, but Rashi is giving pshat. And it's important. Pshat means the simple meaning of the verse. And it's important to follow the pshat from the beginning. And Rashi expects us to realize, he even comments on it, Rashi expects us to realize that from the moment of the Exodus, all the nations would be very afraid. And so they would probably hide their stuff. But then at a certain point, they would check their watches and their clocks and their calendars and say, well, when are they coming? And then they would say, you know what? Maybe we don't have to keep the stuff hidden. Maybe we could take out our gold and look at it and count it and use it. And when they come, we'll hide it. How are they going to know? Because they'll hit the Amorites. Guess who didn't have the luxury of saying that? The Amorites. So the Amorites had to keep their gold hidden all 40 years because at any moment they could be first. Whereas all the other nations, all the other 6 nations of the Canaanite nations, they could keep it out and only hide it last minute. Make sense? Now we know why Rashi says only Amorites, why Rashi says that it was all 40 years. And how do they know? Because they knew that the Jews were coming for them eventually. But we're still left with the question that we asked before: why is a punishment turning into a reward? And what does it all mean on a deeper level? And so, my friends, I need to draw your attention to something very cool. Amorites, or the Amorites, is the English pronunciation of the nation. What is the Hebrew pronunciation of the nation? What's the Hebrew for Amorites? The Amori. Not to be confused with the Emory. That's a different university altogether, right? The Emory is the Emory, but the Amori are what we translate as the Amorites. But in Hebrew, Amori. Aleph, Mem, Vav, Resh, Yud. Take out the vowels. Keep the consonants. Aleph, Mem, Resh. Spells the word? Amar. What does Amar mean?
Says.
To speak. You can't make this up. The nation that we're talking about, vis-a-vis the treasure, having buried the treasure, is a nation that translates, the very name translates as the nation of words. Why does Tzaraat come to a person or to their home? Because of their words, the things that they said, their amirah, their words. Emori, amirah, omar. It's all about speaking. Here's the brilliant idea. The very problem, and you find this often in Judaism, the very problem can also be the solution. What's the problem? Speech. What's the solution? You guessed it, speech. The problem is unhealthy speech. What's the solution? Healthy speech. So let's talk about this for a second. And just let me tell you where we're going with this. The problem of unhealthy speech leads to Tzaraat. The solution of healthy speech leads to treasure. Treasure in the very same place as the problem was. Because you can only fix something at the source of the problem. They tell a joke about the guy who's in a parking lot looking around. Somebody comes by and says, "Can I help you? What are you looking for?" He says, "I'm looking for my keys." He says, "Where did you have your keys last?" He points all the way to the other side of the parking lot. You're like, "So why are you looking here?" He says, "Because here's where the light is." Right? It's supposed to be a joke, right? But you got to look where the problem is. You can't look somewhere else. You're not going to find it somewhere else. If the problem is incorrect speech, the solution is correcting the speech. And so in the place of the Tzaraat affliction, you can actually find treasure in that same space. Toba asked before, rightfully, what? I thought this was a punishment. And the answer is it is a punishment, but a punishment heeded correctly. In other words, when you correct the problem, it leads not just back to where you started, but it leads to an even greater place to find treasure in the same place that there was the negativity. So let's unpack this. Why does a person speak negatively about someone else? Now, there might be many different reasons why, but very often it doesn't come necessarily from a malicious place. Very often, gossip. Think about a gossip session. Where does it come from? What spawns it? What stirs it? What gets it going? So often it happens because we were just schmoozing with someone else and we didn't really have much else to talk about. And so in the vacuum, right, almost of like, I don't know, what should we talk about? We ended up talking about someone else negatively. That's so often what happens with Lashon Hara. So often what happens with gossip or speaking negatively, it's not like we enter a conversation and say, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what happened with so-and-so. Sometimes. But very often it begins with, hey, how's it going? And then like you don't know what else to talk about. And so in the space of emptiness, in other words, in the empty space of how to fill the conversation, we start throwing in things that we think might be interesting. Gossipy things. Let's take a look at some text about this. Let's begin. Yeah, here we go. Look at this. Text 8a. We're going to start with 8a. Rambam, Maimonides. Okay, this is in his Laws of Tzaraat. Hilchot Tumat Tzaraat, his Laws of the Impurity of Tzaraat. He says the following, 8a. We're skipping 7. 8a. This is the path that is followed by the gathering of wicked fools. They begin by speaking excessively about empty matters. Then they come to speak negatively of the righteous. Finally, they become accustomed to speaking against the prophets and casting aspersions on their words. Thus, the speech of the wicked is caused by loitering on street corners, frequenting assemblies of commoners, and spending time at the parties of drunkards. Basically, when you have too much time in your hands, right? And things are just emptiness can lead to negativity. It's interesting that he doesn't say it starts with two people getting together with the intention to take down someone verbally. It's not what happens. Most of the time, it's not what happens. Most of the time, it's frivolity and emptiness that then leads to Lashon Hara, that then leads to negativity. So what's the solution? If we were to stop it right here, what would we say? What's the solution? Well, maybe we would say the solution is don't go to bars, or don't say l'chaim, or don't have, what did all of our mothers hymn tell us? If you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. Or in this case, maybe just don't say anything at all. If you take a look at text 8b from the book of Proverbs, sin is unavoidable when there are many words. Thus the wise seal their lips. In other words, loose lips sink people, right? Loose lips sink people. If you have too much talk, eventually you're going to say something not nice about somebody else. Better not to talk. The Rebbe explains that this is connected with the notion of our minds. We have the same problem with our minds. Text number 9. We have the same problem intellectually, not just verbally, but also in our heads. Thought is a vehicle and a servant of intellect and emotions. Even when it does not serve the intellect or feelings, it continues to function and think and meditate. However, this activity is not only devoid of content, but also open to depravity. It is explained that alien or evil thoughts are caused by the mind's emptiness. When the mind is occupied, the thought has something to serve, and there's no room for, I'll translate this, foolish and vain thoughts devoid of substance. So we have the same problem with the head. If the mind is not filled, with something positive, it's going to be filled with something negative. And so we have a parallel between the mind and the mouth. If there's just emptiness and not much productivity, it's going to end up going in a negative direction. So what's the solution? The easy solution, and the one championed by, I would say, most Jewish communities, is what's called Shmiras Halashon. Shmirat Halashon. What does that mean? It means guard your tongue. Be careful what you say. Consciously make an effort to not talk, to say, and walk away from a conversation, right? Guard your tongue, guard your mouth, guard your thoughts, and that's it. But I would say, from a Hasidic perspective, from a Chabad perspective, that's a very reactive approach. There's a much more proactive approach. And the proactive approach is as follows. Instead of not talking or avoiding conversation, engage in conversation. But make sure that your conversation with somebody is never empty, is never frivolous. If you're having a conversation with somebody, discuss words of Torah, discuss words of positivity. Make sure that there's not the emptiness breeds negativity. So what's the solution? Either don't say anything, or in a much more healthy way, make sure that your words are never empty. Make sure that they're positive and productive and constructive and holy. And that way, if our conversations are holy, they're automatically not going to lead to negative talk. Which means, if I were to rephrase it, instead of the Amorites, instead of the negative Emori, negative speech, instead replace it with a treasure. A speech filled with gold and treasure. I don't mean to literally speak about money. What I mean is to transform the empty talk, forget the negative talk, the empty talk to positive talk. And that preempts the Lashon Hara. So, on a very practical level, you meet up with a friend and you're hanging out and you're having conversation. And I don't know, as they say, you're shooting the breeze or whatever the language is. What this suggestion is, find the treasure, uncover the gold in the walls, meaning inject and invest within your conversation words of Torah, words of meaning. Don't allow it to become so empty that it devolves into Lashon Hara. Keep it meaningful, keep it spiritual, keep it holy, keep it productive, keep it positive. And that way we preempt speaking negatively about someone else. Look, there's two ways to not say Lashon Hara. There's two ways to avoid gossip. Either don't talk or talk nicely, right? Instead of like playing defense and fending off any negative conversation, take the offense. And the offense would be to speak positively about others, or not about others, to speak positively about other things. Positive, share Divrei Torah, words of Torah, share thoughts. Oh, you'll never believe what I studied in Torah today, whether it's a class or you read something online or anything positive. Anything positive and productive keeps us away from the negative. I want to end, anyway, I think it's a practical resolution. Not to avoid, not to focus on the negative, but rather on the positive. So that's one message. And I want to end with one more message. This is a bonus message. And this is not about gossip or negative talk specifically, it's about life in general. Here's the way it works in life. The way it works in life is that oftentimes in the space of our darkest hours, we find the greatest treasure. In the times of the greatest challenge, or maybe the greatest disappointment, and not only the stuff that life brings at us, can make us stronger, but even the things that we mess up, right? The mistakes that we make, and we think, well, if God put it in my path, well, then there's got to be a treasure here. But I made myself stumble. Who says there's a treasure? I am the one that did something negative to get myself in trouble. Who says there's a way out? Who says this too is for the good? If God gives it to me, I can say Gam Sulutova. But if I give it to myself, who says? Who says it's for the good? Comes along the Torah and tells us, even when you gossiped and you did something wrong and there's a consequence, it doesn't feel so nice. At the end of the day, everything that happens, even the self-induced challenges, they also have a gold lining, not just a silver lining, a gold lining. A gold lining waiting in those walls. Seems like everything is falling apart, right? The house is crumbling, literally, the house is coming down. At the end of the day, there are no mistakes in God's world, and there's always gold at the end of the rainbow. This message is sponsored by the leprechaun. I'm kidding, right? There's always gold at the end of the rainbow. Wasn't that the premise behind Lucky Charms cereal? I'm pretty sure that was. Follow the rainbow. Yeah.
So I think the philosophical meaning is beautiful, but on a practical level, if the Jews were super rich leaving Egypt, why would they care about finding treasure in their houses?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question. Mir is asking, if the Jews were wealthy when they left Egypt, why would they need more money getting into the Amorite homes?
To rebuild the home they just had knocked down.
To rebuild the home, exactly. That they just knocked down. They didn't have insurance. My simple answer is, if gold is good, more gold is better. I don't know. Maybe a lot of it was depleted when they built the Mishkan, when they built the Tabernacle. They donated
that's
a lot
what I
of
was going
gold.
to say.
I don't know. Could be any number of reasons. Maybe legacy gifts to their kids and grandkids. I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's interesting, but there's always a pot of gold. That's the point. David, jump in.
Sort of along a similar line. I have to say I'm not getting it. I mean, I get the points that you made, but I don't get the idea of. So, did the people in the house commit the sin that caused the Tzaraat?
That was kind of along the lines of Toba's question. It's interesting because when you read in the Torah, it's simple. They sinned, they got a punishment, and that's the consequence. When you read the Medrash and Rashi, it phrases it because even the Torah doesn't say, if you sin, then this is going to happen. God says, you'll come into the land, and I'll give you Tzaraat in the homes. It's almost like a good thing. And yeah, it's a good thing. So I think your question is, practically speaking, did a person have to have committed the sin to get Tzaraat in the homes, or was it just a bonus that you got, like the draw lottery ticket? I believe it still followed the protocol of sin consequence, but the message is that you can, again, the two messages are, in the place of the sin, you can find the treasure. And message number two, in those moments in which we might think all is lost, there is a meaning there, there's treasure there as well. And so I prefer to not separate them out as two different narratives. Like there is the punishment option and there's the reward option. I prefer to merge them together. There was a punishment, there was a sin, and God is saying there's still something beneficial here. There's still a treasure here that can be gleaned. That's the way I see it. There might be another way to see it, but that's based on my understanding of the commentaries. That's kind of my path.
You would think the Jews would knock down all the houses for like the first
Well,
thing.
you think they would speak a lot of Lashon Hara
Yeah.
to get. All right, what do I have to do to get the Saras thing to get the treasure here? Like, yeah, who do I need to take down? Right? Like, who do I need to speak about? Anyway, all right, good. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yes. Good.
I have a comment
Yes.
that I believe it was the Greek translation of psoriasis, and they called it psoriasis.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's another skin ailment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's different kinds of psoriasis. So it takes a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
I have a practical question about, so which Jews got the gold? Did they all not live in the Amorite houses? I don't understand that.
No, I think that's what David was asking. I think it still followed the formula where someone who, look, the commentaries say that first it afflicted the skin and then the clothing and then the homes. So it was like an escalating situation. Like if a person didn't clean up their act the first time, it then hit deeper, or then hit another layer, then hit another layer. So I don't know. It seems like it was, in these types of extreme situations, but even there, the message is you can fix it, number one, and number two, there's a positive. No experience in life is just a disaster or a mistake or a negative. There's no such thing as something that can't somehow be reclaimed as a positive. I think that's the message. I think that's my pleasure, Dr. Maxey. I think that's the message. The message is there's nothing that we should write off in our lives as being like, well, that was terrible or that was whatever. Not that everything is amazing, but that everything can be instructive, can be constructive, can impart within us a lesson, or at the very least make us stronger. And that maybe that's the treasure. All right, may we not have any challenges. But if we do, because I don't know anybody that doesn't, if we do, may we always find the treasure in the walls, the metaphorical treasure, and you know what? The literal treasure as well. All right, don't forget to buy a lottery ticket. I'm kidding, I don't work for the state. All right, we'll see you all. Have a wonderful week. It's good to get back. Oh, very important announcement. Don't forget, I don't have the flyers yet. Don't forget, we're starting a brand new JLI course next Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, which is one of the most fun classes that I have ever taught, which I haven't yet taught, but I will be teaching. It's called Colorful Profiles, 12 profiles of the greatest Jewish heroes and change makers you've never heard about. These are people that literally changed history and have, for whatever reason, flown under the radar. We're going to tell their stories, look at the artifacts, hear their music, look at their art, read their writings, and enjoy their legacies in the 4-week series coming up next week. So join us. And otherwise, Thursday night Tanya, we're back to our regularly scheduled program, Davening 101 this Shabbat. So looking forward to a lot of learning together for a nice stretch over here. Wonderful. Great to see you. David, Mom, Kay, Danny, Larry, Vlad, Howard, Catherine, Susan, and of course our in-person crew. Thank you guys. Scott, first time. We should have a bell for the first time, but welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys soon. Laila Tov, everybody.